started thinking about exactly that, and I thought, well, it's always good to talk about taxonomy, I think. As a taxonomist, I can really not talk about taxonomy. So I thought it would be good with this audience to briefly talk about where we're at with taxonomy and some of the opportunities and challenges and strengths and limitations of taxonomy. I'm extremely dedicated to that fine institution, the Western Australian Herbarium, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about the herbarium and some of the opportunities and challenges that the herbarium has. And I can talk more freely about it since I don't work there anymore. I'm really keen to talk about a proposal, an idea that a number of us have to develop a flora of Western Australia. And I put Western in brackets there because we can actually do this in a really interesting way with some of the new developments in this space. And I need to talk a little bit about the decade plan that I've been working on, and it is very much an important feature in this space, I think, for the next decade. So, with those things to talk about, I came up with what I think is probably the worst title of a talk that I've ever made in my life. So I want to talk about stuff. So, taxonomy. I find that it's actually really interesting in audiences like this to just talk about what taxonomy is and what the project of taxonomy is, because it's actually not all that straightforward. And taxonomy is, I think, a much more interesting thing than meets the eye. Philosophers have been talking about taxonomy since Plato, and we still talk about taxonomy in very similar sorts of terms. It's much more interesting than it appears. So my definition of the project of taxonomy, or my description of the project of taxonomy, what we try and do, is that nature is incredibly complex. The patterns of diversity that we find in biodiversity, the patterns that are there, are extremely complex. It's probably one of the most complex things that we as humans have to deal with. Neuroscience and the thing that happens between our ears is probably the other most complex thing. I became a taxonomist because at university I was interested in cosmology and I decided it was too simple. So we seek to reduce this incredibly complex patterning to a workable taxonomy, a named system of classification. There are taxonomies in all sciences. To a workable taxonomy that we can use for communication, that you guys can use for communication when you're writing a report, etc. And of those, the important features here are the patterns are extremely complex. We need to reduce that complexity, which means that our taxonomy can't possibly capture the full complexity of the pattern. That's what reduction is all about. We need to reduce this to a workable taxonomy, and workable there is a really operative word. And the point of a taxonomy is for communication, to be able to talk about nature in a sensible fashion. These aspects of taxonomy, all of them are actually really interesting. How do we go about dealing with that reduction in complexity? What is workable? What's the best form of communication? Just a couple of points here, and I have relatively few slides because I really these are just reminders for me really of what I'm supposed to be talking about. The first point is, as I said, the complexity is extreme, and especially in a place like Western Australia, which is highly diverse. The complexity of patterns that we find in nature is very extreme. Discovery is still a big thing in Western Australia. On average, around 50 new species are discovered and named in Western Australia every you guys are responsible for quite a lot of that in discovering things that don't seem to fit, and then over time we as taxonomists can get in there and try and make it fit. I can really only give a shout out to to some of the messages that came across in a number of the talks this morning, that it's incredibly important that when you are in the field and you see something that doesn't quite work, you need to bring it to the attention of the taxonomist at the herbarium, because you may well have found a new species, and it's in everyone's interest for that new species to be recognised and dealt with in the EIA process. So discovery is a really big thing. The complexity creates constraints. There aren't nearly enough taxonomists in the world to deal with the world. There aren't nearly enough plant taxonomists in Western Australia to deal with Western Australia's plants. And so frustrations arise that something is discovered and there is no one who can tell you whether it's a new species or not. And that's simply the case. There will be groups of plants for which no one has the expertise to really give you a definitive answer. And just as I'm sure you always find with your clients, we as taxonomists often get really frustrated when clients simply want an answer in a case where an answer simply can't be given. So please be aware of those constraints. Another thing that I wanted to just say briefly here, a question that I often got when I was at the herbarium, someone would come in with a specimen and it wouldn't fit morphologically to anything particularly well, and would be a member of a group that's rather complex, and they would say, is it a new species or not? And we'd say, we don't know. And the next question was, oh, can't you just sequence its genes and then tell me? That's a really common one, and I'm sure that you get those sorts of things from your clients as well. The idea that genetics will give you an answer where more traditional, perhaps, modes of taxonomy may not. That's absolutely not the case. I have it up in there in that definition of what taxonomy tries to do, that we are dealing with complex patterns. The patterns in biodiversity, the genetic patterns in biodiversity, are as complex as the morphological patterns in biodiversity. And so if we want to try to reduce the complexity, to reduce the taxonomy, genetics is going to give just as much as anything else. So please be aware that genetics isn't a silver bullet, it's an important part of what we do. The herbarium, most of you, I think very few of you will not be aware of the work that the herbarium does, so I'm not going to go on this, but the 750,000 odd specimens that we have in the herbarium, that is our baseline for the complex patterning in Western Australian plants. The 10,000 plus species that we have named in Western Australia, that's our workable taxonomy, and it's a work in progress because, as I said, we're adding about 50 species per year. And Flora&Veg and the other products of the herbarium, Noitio, all of those things are our communication strategy for getting that out to you as important end users of taxonomy. So the herbarium is very much in that project of taxonomy, and everything that it does is related to that. I want to talk briefly about the idea that we could develop a flora of Western Australia. It would be a tremendous thing, I think, if instead of having scattered resources, instead of you guys having to come into the reference herbarium and compare one stick with another stick, if we had a flora of Western Australia, just imagine how grand that would be. You can understand how much of a challenge it is because we've got 10,000 species, but there is a proposal at the moment doing the rounds of WABSI to do exactly this, to start an electronic flora of Western Australia project. At a national level, we've developed recently a new platform by which we can kickstart and get the wheels back on the Flora of Australia project. And the way that we've built that is that we can build a Flora of Western Australia while building a Flora of Australia. And we can build a Flora of Australia while building a Flora of Western Australia. That is, we can have sort of linked projects within one platform, and whenever anything is produced at the Western Australian level, it contributes to the Flora of Australia level, and vice versa, so you get two-way information flows. The URL there is the URL for the new Flora of Australia online. If you're not yet using it, I think you should. And a shout out to the WOBSI project proposal to use this platform to develop a Flora of Western Australia. And I would like to see all of you guys being strong proponents of that project, both with your clients and with government, to see if we can get it up. How many people would benefit and would like to have an online Flora of Western Australia that covers all species with identification keys, maps, distribution, information ecological? Yes, I think I need to say no more. I briefly want to finish up just talking about the KThiele plan. Taxonomy and systematics, this project by which we try to understand nature and to produce a workable way of communicating about biodiversity, is an absolute framework science. When you think about it, it underpins everything that you do. Could you do your work if we didn't have named taxa, if we had no idea what was what, and we had no way of recognising what species are out there, and we had no names for the species that are there? Clearly you couldn't. Being as fundamental as they are, taxonomy and systematics tend to fly under the radar compared with some other sciences that are more sort of froth and bubble and get excitement going. Any foundational discipline is often flies under the radar a bit, and taxonomy has two problems in this respect. One is that it's it has long historical antecedents. It's an old science, and young sciences, the new kids on the block, are always more pushy than the old ones. And secondly, we can do an enormous amount of taxonomy with a good dissecting microscope and ruler. We don't need machines that go bing that cost billions of dollars on the whole. So for these reasons, taxonomy and systematics tend to not gain the attention, the funding attention, for instance, that we believe that they should. So a number of years ago, a number of us got together and started working towards this thing that we released in April this year, a 10-year strategic plan for taxonomy and systematics in Australia and New Zealand. Very much an agreed vision. Our discipline is in incredibly exciting times. The technologies, the conceptual frameworks, the things we can do now are just amazing, and we want taxonomy and systematics to really be able to make the most of this in the next decade. So we got together and we produced this agreed vision, just a number of some quotes from it, just the sorts of things we want to do. For instance, is to really significantly accelerate species discovery. Only about 30% of Australia's organisms have been discovered and named. We want to work towards a hyper-taxonomy initiative where we actually deal with the rest. We want to really enhance services for end users, for you guys. We are very, very aware of the need for our discipline to be extremely useful, to have clients and to meet the needs of those clients. And a significant part of the KThiele plan is around how we can better meet your needs, so that I hope gets your support. We want to support the strategic growth of the discipline. Taxonomy and systematics suffered, the death of 1,000 cuts over the last 40 years or 50 years or so, and we really need to reverse that and turn it around and get many more people in to do the enormous amount of work that we know needs to be done. There is, you can easily find this plan. It's on the web. Just Google those words and you'll find it. I encourage you to read it and get behind it. The EIA was a supporter of the Decatur Plan program when we started off, and is one of our really important stakeholder groups. I hope that in the next several weeks to a month maybe, we will establish a new peak body for taxonomy in Australia that we will probably call Taxonomy Australia, unless someone can come up with a better term for it. And that has as a very major role improving the connectivity between our discipline, between the sector, taxonomy and biosystematics, and, for instance, your discipline, so connecting with stakeholder groups is a really important part of it. So I'm hoping that there'll be quite a lot of movement in this space in the next several years, working up towards a real decade of achievement in some of the things we can do. Obviously I don't have time to go into details of some of the things that we'd like to do, that they're all described and listed in the Decatur Plan. And that's it for that extremely broad brush overview of the connection between my discipline, my sector, taxonomy and systematics, and your sector. If I can say one thing, I would say that for this audience, the one thing is, can you please promote this proposal to produce a Flora of Western Australia? It's a WOBSE initiative, but I think it's probably fair to say it doesn't really have to champion, and this community could be a really, really important champion for this. If you don't have a Flora of Western Australia within the next decade, then I think we've all failed miserably at something that's really important. That's the one thing. Thank you. Any questions? Or comments or perspectives?
I guess I'll start off with a question of my own, Kevin. With the Flora of Australia project, is there, I know that some of the other states do have some flora, e-flora resources as well. Is there a push to incorporate those and sort of sweep it up all into the same entity?
Yes, exactly. So the grand vision that we have is actually getting into the modern age. I said a bit earlier when I was talking about the Flora of Australia project, I mentioned that the wheels fell off. Many of you will know the Flora of Australia, many of you will use it. It's those volumes on a shelf. The body, the Commonwealth body that was dealing with the Flora of Australia was a bit like Kodak. It realised too late that the world had changed, and that producing print volumes and not having a really serious online presence just wasn't going to cut it. And for that and other reasons, the wheels fell off the project, the Flora of Australia project, that is. A number of the states, the other states in Australia that, let's face it, have vastly simpler floras than ours, have got floras. Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania's got a bit, South Australia. The big states that don't have floras, of course, are Western Australia and Queensland, and guess why that is? It's not surprising. But the new system that we've developed, and which is through which the Flora of Australia is now being deployed, and using which we've bolted the wheels back onto the Flora of Australia project, and it's now getting up ahead of steam again. That platform will allow us to have a Flora of Australia, a flora of every state in Australia, a flora of every region in every state in Australia, and a florula, it's a very hard word to say, but it is a word, a florula of the area where you're going to go and do your survey. So using the Flora of Australia platform at the moment, you can go to, currently we only go down as far as bioregion, but you can put in the bioregion, you give the bioregion where you're doing your work, and you can get a flora for that bioregion. So we have this system that is sort of infinitely expandable or collapsible in a way, and I'm hoping that during the next decade, all of the state floras and the Flora of Australia and these regional floras will all come together as a single, very flexible system that we can use.
And who will fund it?
It's been, Alex, excellent question.
Thank you.
So the Flora of Australia project is funded with some very modest Commonwealth funding that comes through the Australian Biological Resources Study. One of the things we want to do in the decadal plan is to double or triple or quadruple the funding for APRIS. At a state level, the whole point of the WOBSE project to develop a flora of Western Australia, probably starting with the Pilbara because that's such an obvious thing to do, but painting the program as to develop the flora of the whole of Western Australia, that needs to be funded. And WOBSE doesn't have funding itself. It needs to get funding from industry and government, and you guys are a very important leveraging force to try to encourage that funding to come in.
We have a question at the back as well.
Yeah, question, just supporting what you've been saying. Of course, coming from a very depauperistic state.
It's not that bad, but it's better than Victoria.
6 or 7 years. Nobody's counting. Look, I worked in New South Wales prior to our statewide flora, and of course you can do it. But now that we've got a statewide flora that's online, oh my God, I can be out in the middle of nowhere, get my phone out, and it just makes everything that much more efficient. And that much more, and more people can do the work. I don't know how you work here without one. In Queensland, I try and work in Queensland, and it's got the same situation as you presented. And, the last statewide flora of Queensland was 1898 to 1904. It's slightly out of date.
Yes, that's done better than Western Australia. We've never had one.
True too. But look, the efficiencies that are going are just marvellous. Everybody I think should be supporting this very much.
Thanks very much, John. And like I said, that's the one thing.
Just one, whose role is it to really drive this? We're here, you're saying we should be encouraged to do it. But at the end of the day, the government's only got so much money. As society and as community members, should we be actively contributing to some of this if we really think it's important?
You mean in a monetary sense, or in
both in-kind support, money?
Yep. In a monetary sense, clearly, say in the EIA and Z or ECA, won't be able to contribute in any sort of major way compared with what's needed. In a sense of contributing information, absolutely. One of the things we need to do with this is to socialise it out, and you guys have an enormous amount of experience and knowledge that actually needs to be captured. But I think that the big thing is to do some really canny and strategic advocacy towards this end of getting this project up. Advocacy can't be scattergun. You can't sort of have good intentions and go talk to someone one time and expect it to make any difference. Advocacy needs to be very coordinated, very canny, and very strategic. And I think that we have the things in place at the moment. It's an unusual juncture. We've got WOBSE. We managed to get a flora of Western Western Australia project up as a potential WOBSI project. We've got the Taxonomy Indicated Plan, which gives a context for it. We've got the Flora of Australia online platform, which gives a platform that we can use for it. All the ducks are in line, except one, and that's getting money out of government and industry. So if you guys can help with that in a very strategic way, and I'd be very keen to talk with the leadership of the IANZ and ECA and try and have a proper campaign of advocacy rather than scattergun.
Are there any more questions?
Might be a bit controversial, but what would your thoughts on that being part of an offset process?
I won't comment. For several reasons. One is I don't actually understand the offset process, and another one is I think that my understanding is that research compared with an offset of a parcel of land is research is not actually a suitable offset for the destruction of one parcel of land. There's a can of worms here that I don't want to get into.
It's a nice way to finish up.